Now, in 2014, during elections in Afghanistan, the message from the Taliban couldn't be clearer. If you vote, we'll kill you. And true to that warning, the Taliban began killing people in an intensified campaign aimed at disrupting that election. Well, thankfully, things haven't degenerated to that level yet in Nigeria, with less than 3 weeks to go before the ballot. But a crisis is deepening here. Every day in the last fortnight has seen fuel lines and cash queues, and it's not clear when the situation will end. The crisis is affecting all sectors of the economy, and it's prompted accusations and denials that there are those who seem determined to disrupt the election to such an extent that the outcome will have no credibility. In other words, if it looks like my candidate isn't going to win, then sod the election. Well, thankfully, such people, if they exist, remain in the minority, because those in the know suggest that the number of people intending to vote is so overwhelming that such threats appear to have little consequence. So, on February the 25th, can we look forward to starting the political process of lowering the coffin of the many avoidable miseries in this country into the ground? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the National Publicity Secretary of the ruling APC party, Felix Morka. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Great to see you.
Thank you, Charles.
Let's start with the latest in the series of privations Nigerians have had to endure in recent times, and prominent, as you know, on that list, beyond the perennial issue of insecurity, would have to be access to the new Naira notes. APC governors have tried to get President Buhari to extend the deadline. That doesn't seem to be working. What's your take on where things are as far as that goes?
Now, first of all, just to put on the record that, as a party, we are absolutely in sympathy with our people, Nigerians, who have had to endure the level of hardship that we're experiencing on those two matters, the fuel scarcity and the Naira scarcity. I mean, the fuel scarcity is something that we've lived with for many years, and and it's relative. We've in the life of this administration over the last nearly 8 years, I think the government has done a better job in comparison with the previous administrations in managing the fuel situation. Fuel has been largely available to us, throughout all of the Decembers we've had under this administration, which was not quite the case previously. But you know what? I think the new dimension, which is really troubling, is the Naira, crisis, the scarcity of our own currency. Now, I think that most people I've talked to, most analysts I've read, I've reviewed, basically say, look, if the CBN and the government believe that, redesign of our currency at this time, may have some value, that value now is, being called into question by the way and manner this policy is being managed to the point where people do not have free access to this currency. And, as a party, we actually, are affected also, and we see people suffering, and that's needless. But when you also look at it, beyond the policy, which most people can agree may, have some value, I think the problem is that some of the operators in the system who ought to ensure that whatever money is pushed out into circulation actually is enabled to circulate. We've seen videos and some of the interventions by, our law enforcement authorities and CBN monitors, at banks, showing stacks of, our currency that are sitting idle while people are outside of these banks, waiting in vain to access, their money. Now, look, that's something that is sordid, and we completely disapprove of the conduct of some of these, operators who are unnecessarily, I think, making this even worse than it should be. Because look, in other parts of the world, people change currency and they give a huge amount of time. Now, I'm not going to sit here and second guess the CBN as to why they had this very short time frame for, recalling and the release of new notes. I won't do that. But, I expect that the CBN would already, prior to even the announcement of the policy, actually take its time to do all of the risk, analysis, assessment analysis, to determine, to see where the vulnerabilities are in our economy, where people are likely to cash in on this policy, to actually either make, quick profit for themselves, but also, completely hold the policy to ransom. And I think that's what we're dealing with. And Nigerians are seeing all of the information coming out from even the official sector, law enforcement, showing these banks, you have videos circulating where people, for instance, have, this wad of notes still in the wrappers, placed within, the ATM trays. Of course, that will not dispense. And people are outside suffering. Look, we all, I think, speak about the private sector as, a constituency or a sector that can lead and has led in many economies in reform and in repositioning, some of those economies. But, we're seeing here the private sector, especially the banking sector, not all of them, but a section of that sector, actually, completely doing things they ought not do, things that the opposite of their responsibility to ensure that, whatever policy the CBN has, enacted will be translated in a seamless way to enable people actually access their money, because it is their money and they have a right to their money.
Well, I mean, the point here, and you've made some pretty good points there as well, but the problem that you face is that all this is happening under an APC government. And people are bound to make the association, because whoever you blame, I mean, you've got law enforcement operating under an APC government. You've got the CBN operating under an APC government. You've got the president operating under an APC government. So what do you expect people to say?
Yes, I know. Look, it's easy to draw those lines and say, look, what, the APC government is in charge, the police, law enforcement, the bankers and everybody. But, that's fine. That's on a macro level. But you know what? For somebody who is interested, you bank with, Zenith Bank or bank with, UBA, whatever bank, that you bank with. When you go there, you expect that even within the, contexts of this, crisis, to be able to access your money. But when officials who are not necessarily card-carrying members of APC, who are not necessarily members of, the APC government, who are in the private sector, I want to underscore that, who then, undertake acts that make it difficult or are inimical to the seamless, effective implementation of policy. Yes, it's okay to just say, it's APC government, the bankers are operating under APC government, but we must also, I think, call out those, actors who are, performing, contrary to the expectations of the public.
Yeah, no question about
because
that.
The CBN government, Mr. President, is not going to go and feed this ATM. So, for instance, one of the banks was discovered to have about 287 million naira in brand new notes on its, shelves. Look, yes, the president is APC and an APC president, but no one expects that the president is going to leave, his job to come into the bank room to actually take this money and personally hand it out. Now, I think the government has done what they're supposed to do, which is send monitors out. And that's why we're seeing this information. Otherwise, you and I as citizens have no access to the vault of the banks. Only the regulators and those authorized have access. And, the government is trying to push out its own officials to go, on these monitoring missions to discover what's actually going on, why these monies that have been pushed out are not getting in the hands of our people.
Okay, well,
yes.
Ultimately, it's being politicized because the APC has accused the PDP of causing the crisis, even though clearly the PDP doesn't run the monetary system and they don't employ the governor of the central bank. I mean, so why do you reckon that it's a plot and the PDP are behind it?
Okay, when this event started, we have, about 4 major candidates in this election. Maybe there might be others, but the PDP candidate is one of the major candidates in this party. Now, against the backdrop of what is going on, the indescribable suffering of our people, why would anyone, I don't care whether they're politicians or presidential candidates, come out to the public to basically stand against efforts and the call for the CBN and for all of the entities concerned to do everything to ensure that Nigerians actually are able to access the money with minimal difficulty.
Well, I don't think they stood against
No,
that.
well, he did. Atiku did. I mean, in his...
What he said is that he supports the policy, which a significant percentage of Nigerians support.
No, absolutely. He says he supports the policy, which everyone does. I mean, there's no one, even in my party, who is standing against the policy per se. Policy is policy. But implementation of policy is sometimes a different kettle of fish. You know, they're not coterminous necessarily, that you have a policy, therefore implementation will be
absolutely
in line. So, but what Atiku is saying, which I find disturbing, is that he is saying to the CBN, under no circumstance must you adjust those timelines you've created.
Yes.
Now, as far as I'm concerned personally, and even speaking for myself as a citizen, I say that if the CBN determines, for example, that some of the individuals or actors or sectors that are not promoting or helping to achieve its own objective, the set policy, then the CBN must, stand to reverse itself on any aspect of that policy, including extending timelines, including reviewing its. Look, those decisions were made by the CBN.
Yeah, but they already extended.
They already extended.
Deadline.
I agree.
Right.
But so once they extended, who says that extension or the extension they made is now cast in stone? My point is that if Nigerians are put in that predicament where they are unable to access their money, I am saying that policy must be, adjusted to deliver on the utmost good for the people. So if the CBN determines that there's a reason to adjust it against the advice or the suggestion of Atiku Abubakar, I think the CBN should go forward and make that revision.
But the point is...
But we don't make the call, is that the CBN?
Yeah, but the point is, well, you're putting them under pressure. Yes. I mean, the point is that you appear to be the only party of all the major parties that's calling for this deadline
because
to
we
be
are
shifted.
The sensitive party. We are the ones listening to the pulse of Nigerians.
Yeah, but if you
go paying attention to what people are feeling.
We deal in journalism, and if you go out and talk to, there's a queue downstairs now of people waiting.
Correct.
You can go across the city, across many places. A lot of the people will say, yes, we don't like the privations, we don't like the problems that we're encountering as a result of not accessing our money. But to a man and woman, most of them are saying that they support that principle. That all of them, I mean, there's a whole group of people who marched in solidarity with the central bank yesterday. All of them, including people on the streets, are saying, yes, we're suffering, but we believe that this principle should remain for the simple reason that it is the surest way, or at least one of the surest ways of guaranteeing a free and fair election that will not be tainted by vote buying.
Okay, let me say this.
So why is it just the APC that is the only one who seems to think that they feel for the people, and the people are saying, don't feel for us, stick with what the CBN is saying?
There are two concerns that we have as a party. One is that, just like you referenced those you may speak with, if you take a casual, opinion of Nigerians, there are also many who, like you said in the beginning of this show, who associate the policy and its implementation with the party. Rightly so, because this is our government. Now, a policy was made with all the merits and demerits. And like you said, most Nigerians agree that the policy may have more merits than demerits. I mean, if, redesign our currency will help us achieve free and fair election, no one who loves this country will quarrel with that. And we don't quarrel with that. The APC does not quarrel with that. But we're saying that you can actually have that policy to address those, important national needs and still have the currency available to our people. They are not mutually exclusive. It's not as though, on the one hand, when you have the, policy, then you may, completely impoverish and deny our people. And what our party is saying is that we think that both objectives are consistent with one another. You can have a policy to redesign the currency, but also have an outcome where people have, access to their money. Because, look, a man who is hungry, a woman who is hungry, who is called upon to vote, may actually not come out to vote if this problem becomes that protracted to the point where people are affected. Because look, you know what, Charles, let's not kid ourselves. The informal sector of this country is massive, even though people sometimes tend to, just put it down. But it's a huge, section of our economy, and it's a vibrant, important, aspect of the economy of this country. So, and many of people in that sector depend almost exclusively on cash transactions. So when you take all of your money to the bank and you are that woman who has a small restaurant, a booker, a food vendor on the roadside, you need cash to buy your tomato. Many of these individuals had to go through third parties, relations, friends, to exchange their money in the hope that when they put it into the bank, they're going to be able to withdraw. But then you give your friend or your relation your money to put it because you don't have a bank account, and they are not able to get the money. How do you go out buying your tomato and buying your things to actually cook so you can earn money and create wealth and sustain yourself? The point I'm making is that we, as the ruling party, and like you said, we don't deny that this government is our government, and they enunciated this policy. The CBN governor is working at the behest and under the pleasure of the president. They initiated this policy with all the good, but now that the policy is under implementation, and we're seeing that the impact is such that people associate that impact, that negative impact, with the party. We have a duty, I believe, to speak out over and above any other party, because perceptionally, we are the receiving end of all of this. So when we speak out, it's not because we are against the policy. It's not because we don't appreciate the policy or think that the policy has positive aspects. We simply are saying that the policy is good, implementation should be good as well, but it's not up to par.
And therefore, as a result of that, it should be, the deadline should be moved.
Absolutely.
Well,
not necessarily. Look, it's not about the deadline.
Right.
If, for instance, the CBN is able to push out sufficient money, and this hoarding by the private sector, the bankers themselves, are able to be checked as they're trying to do now, and this money becomes available, and I can go get 20,000 naira, a day or a week even. I can buy fuel for my car. That's always.
Well, I understand the point, and I have to let you know that the president has said, and he did tell APC governors that to give him 7 days, and those 7 days haven't expired yet. So we'll see how things go. But the fact remains that the APC is on its own, because not just Atiku Abubakar, but Peter Obi, 13 other political parties have all stood with the central bank on this matter. Let me move away from that, because we've got like a few minutes left. I don't know if you've seen the latest poll conducted by Next Year, showing Bola Ahmed Tinubu, your candidate, in third place behind Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar. What's your reaction to that?
We don't take that seriously, because we are confident of the offer we have before Nigerians, and we're confident of the message we have continued to deliver to Nigerians. We're confident of the enormous accomplishments of the APC administration of President Muhammad Buhari. We're confident of the quality of offer that our candidate has presented or is presenting before Nigerians. So all of those polls are, as far as I'm concerned, are procured. They're not. I wouldn't associate them with any degree of objectivity or even rationality. So I wouldn't bother myself.
Well, the people who conducted the poll have invited all the political parties to come and look at their data. You can examine the data, you can bring your experts to pore over it in order to show the accuracy and the efficacy of it. But what I want to ask you is this. Are you prepared for the very real possibility that this election could wrest control of Aso Rock from the APC?
An election by definition is a contest. It's competition amongst competing parties. That's the nature of it. in 2015, we wrested power from the PDP because we won the election. You know, we are in this election to win. We are working hard. I mean, if you look at our candidate, he's everywhere. He has not, you know, stopped for a moment to take a break. And none of us who are involved have stopped to take a break. We're working hard. But you know what? An election is an election. Ultimately, the voters, the electorate, are the ones who decide. We are confident that based on the accomplishments of this government over the last few years, and what's on offer by our candidate, and when you look at the comparative advantage of all the candidates, we are absolutely confident that we're going to win this election. But behind your question is, again, our submission to the nature of democracy. It is about the will of the people as expressed at the polls. As long, and that's why we are also concerned that those who are seeking to procure all of this, last moment wave of protests and, disaffection, whether they're in the private sector, whether in the political system, we're saying that is not about, running a free and fair election. I think a free and fair election presupposes that everyone has that, fighting chance, is able to sell their ideas and, persuade voters to support them. But to throw in some of these externalities and, create these moments where people are suffering and hoping that they're going to simply vote by the, these sort of, like I said,
but again, I ask you, who's creating it? It's your government.
No,
I mean, it's an APC government.
The APC government, Charles, the APC government, we agreed earlier. The APC government created a policy, which, like you said, most Nigerians support.
Yeah, but it's also the APC's job to implement the policy.
Well, it's not just the APC's job. It's the job of a wide spectrum of actors.
Yeah, but you have to enforce the policy.
If
you're not able to enforce it, then questions will be raised about your capacity as a government.
Well, that's a point. But the point, and in my response, I said to you, this government has also instituted all of these monitoring efforts to make sure that the monies that are pushed out of the CBN to the banks get into those teller machines or are paid out over the counter as the CBN has revised itself, to actually ensure that people actually have access to their own money. You say, look, when I have money and, you, by denying me access, like today I was at the bank to make
very briefly, because we're almost out of time.
The bank was at 3 o'clock. They were closed, perhaps because of all of the pressure. But then you go back home, you open your app, you can't even access the app. You see, this is not, well, you can associate it with APC, but APC is not a manager of the banking apps that are not working. So the banks themselves have a responsibility, because we always say at all levels that the private sector, should be allowed to lead this whole idea to retake and reinvent, our economy. But they must also bear some responsibility beyond the political actors.
Felix, I want to thank you very much indeed for coming and making very robust points there. Felix Morka is the National Publicity Secretary of the ruling APC party.
Thank you so much.